All right, welcome back in. It's been a tough primary season for the polls, right? Socialist Abdul El Sayed, he won the Democrat Senate primary in Michigan, but the polls predicted he'd win by double digits, and he only ended up winning by less than 1%. In Minnesota, the polls predicted Angie Craig would beat Peggy Flanagan for the Democrat Senate primary, but Flanagan, she went on to win by 20 points. And last week in Wisconsin, Francesca Hong was the heavy favorite to be the Democrat nominee for governor, but ended up losing to David Crowley. Here to break it down, why the polls have been so off, founder of Zeus Political Index, Patrick Alaco. Patrick, always good to see you, man.
Great to be here, Bob.
All right, let's talk about it. What is going wrong so far this year? What's your data telling you?
I think it comes down to three things: turnout, response, and late movement. First, the pollsters are struggling with who actually shows up in these low turnout primaries. In Wisconsin, David Crowley's campaign modeled an older electorate, and then they reweighted their internal numbers and saw a toss-up when the public polls were still showing Hong well comfortably ahead. Second, there's a non-response bias. Younger, highly engaged progressive voters can be easier to reach and more willing to take political surveys than their more moderate Democrats. And third, the Democratic establishment is consolidating late. They're fighting back. In Michigan, establishment money, AIPAC money, and support rallied behind Stevens and turned what looked like an El Sayed blowout into a race decided by less than a point. In Wisconsin, the establishment response was even more dramatic. Crowley dropped out, and then he returned with the backing of Governor Tony Evers, and then he became the vehicle for Democrats who wanted to stop Francesca Hong. So that late consolidation completely changed the race. So the lesson isn't that the polling was bad. It's that the electorate itself was still moving and that the polls failed to capture where the voters were ultimately going.
Clear up until the last couple days, you kind of felt that shift happening almost in real time. Let's talk about another big Senate race up in Maine, Susan Collins. So I guess she is now trailing Troy Jackson in the Senate race by 2 points within the 3-point margin of error, obviously. Troy Collins, he was exposed for Troy Jackson, excuse me, he was allegedly exposed for marrying his cousin. Okay, so do you believe these polls here, is he really up to?
You can't possibly believe it after what I just said. No. We got to stop looking at the top line numbers. The poll says Jackson 48, Collins 46. That tells me Maine is still competitive. It does not convince me Jackson's actually ahead, because Collins has a coalition that is unusually difficult to poll. Republicans, independents, and crossover voters. We saw this movie in 2020. Polls had Sarah Gideon leading Collins right up to Election Day. One of the final Colby polls had Gideon up by 3. Collins won by 8.6 points, and Biden took the state by 9 points. So my position today is that Maine leans Collins stronger than that 46% top line suggests.
Okay, I'm enjoying this. Let's take it down south. Florida tomorrow. Another big primary day, the Senate Democrat primary. So we have a DSA candidate, Angie Nixon. She's looking to upset Democrat retired Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, who currently holds a 10-point lead in the polls. And it's safe to say maybe Nixon just as radical as the rest of the socialist candidates we've seen across the country this year. And we have a soundbite on that, Patrick, I want to play.
Representative Persons Mullica has waived closed.
All right, I also want to mention Nixon currently trailing Vindman, as we said, but it's just where does it go here, right? There's what the polling shows right now. Also, we got a matchup against Republican Senator Ashley Moody. Nixon gives Democrats a better chance of winning the general election. Maybe, I guess. It's all over the place. There's so many different polls out here. What do you think's happening in Florida?
Vindman remains the favorite tomorrow. Polymarket has Vindman with an 88-point advantage over Nixon. The bigger story is that Nixon may actually poll a little better against Ashley Moody than Vindman does, which tells you Democratic primary voters could be weighing electability differently than we assume. So tomorrow is actually another test of whether the polls are correctly identifying who's going to show up.
All right, let's get to this here. YouGov, big one here. Generic congressional ballot gives Democrats an 8-point lead over Republicans. Harry Yenton over at CNN, he's actually predicting a Democrat sweep this November. We got a soundbite from him. Let's play that.
There it is. Scenario number one is a Democratic sweep at 52% chance. I was surprised by this before we started cracking the numbers, but that is why we do it. 52 Dems, and 48 Republicans. That's what it would get you.
All right, Patrick, we're talking about everything here. The national picture, though, what do we make of it?
So, first of all, let's go with YouGov to begin with as the pollster. They got Trump wrong by 3 points in 2024. They had Harris winning in both the Electoral College and the national vote. So I dismissed that right away. But even if you take a 6-point or 8-point advantage in the generic House ballot, that's simply not enough to move the structural advantage. Now, should Republicans be worried? Absolutely. We just moved Max Miller's Ohio 7 seat into the toss-up category. So at Zeus, we've got Republicans at 216. Remember, you got to get to 218. We've got Democrats at 215, and we've got 4 seats now still uncalled. The problem is Republicans now have to win 2 of those 4 seats to get to 218. So yes, the environment is dangerous for Republicans, but the House isn't gone. It's still being decided district by district.
Okay, I'm going to take your word for it. Still being decided. One last one. Going to skip to the other side of things. The latest 2028 polling has Vice President Vance leading the Republican race by 25 points. Now, many in the media will say that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is going to give Vance a run for his money. Are you buying that one at all?
Well, I don't think Vance is, I wouldn't say he's in trouble. I'd say this election going forward is proceed with caution. I wouldn't crown Vance right now. I think that he's the front runner by far. Rubio's already shown he can close the gap in New Hampshire. Vance went from a 46-point lead in February to just 10 points in July in New Hampshire. So Vance is the favorite today, but this is not a settled race at all, and Rubio or someone else could eventually emerge.
What about a Rubio-Vance ticket? What's the polling show on
Could
that?
be.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Here, we're out of time. Patrick Alaco, that was fun. That was fun to cruise around the country
great.
and see where things are going on. I appreciate it.
I enjoyed it, Bob. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Hunter Biden has said some wild stuff over the past few years, but he might have just made the most absurd comparison we've ever heard. The guy he just compared Barack Obama